There was a tragedy here at Flying Baron Estates yesterday at 10 a.m. involving the lead guitar player, Randy Rhoads, 25-year-old talented guitar player for the Ozzy Osbourne.
He was the future of rock and roll, a guitar virtuoso who, alongside Ozzy Osbourne, was about to conquer the world. But on March 19, 1982, his flight came to a fiery, tragic end. The story we all know is one of drugs, recklessness, and a joyride. Gone horribly wrong. But what if that story isn't the whole truth? What if new details, whispered for decades, suggest the Randy Rhoads mystery isn't just about a reckless pilot, but a horrifying accident that no one could have stopped? In the world of rock and roll, some stories are told so often they become grim legends. The death of Randy Rhoads is one of them. For over 40 years, the narrative has been painfully simple. A brilliant young guitarist killed by the foolish actions of a reckless pilot on a cocaine-fueled joyride. It's a story of rock hedonism, a senseless stunt that ended in a crash, silencing one of the most promising musicians of his generation. We've accepted it, we've mourned it, and we've used it as a cautionary tale. But history is rarely that simple. Over the years, the people who were there have offered pieces of a different puzzle. Eyewitness accounts have been re-examined, and motivations have been questioned. A troubling theory, long whispered in private, has finally come to light, pushed by those close to the band. This theory doesn't offer comfort. It doesn't bring Randy back. But it does reframe the entire tragedy, shifting it from a story of reckless stupidity to something far more complex and, in some ways, even more heartbreaking. It suggests the key to the crash isn't just in the pilot's seat, but in the passenger seat right next to him. This isn't just about retelling a story, it's about challenging a legend. Today we're going to look at the official narrative, and then explore the compelling, alternative account of what may have really happened in those terrifying final moments inside that Beechcraft bonanza. What if the villain of this story wasn't a person at all, but a sudden, unavoidable medical catastrophe? The answer doesn't make the tragedy any less painful, but it changes it forever. To understand how big the loss was, you first have to understand the sheer brilliance of the man. Randy Rhoads wasn't just another guitar player, he was a force of nature. A quiet, small-statured guy from Santa Monica, California, he played with a musical wisdom that felt ancient. His mother, Dolores Rhoads, ran a music school, Musonia, and that's where Randy's journey began. He was a true student of the instrument, practicing for hours on end, not just mastering hard rock, but also diving deep into the discipline and theory of classical guitar. This unique fusion would become his superpower. He got his first taste of the rock scene with Quiet Riot, an LA band he co-founded. While they gained a following, especially in Japan, they couldn't quite crack the mainstream in America. Randy, always the musician, also taught guitar at his mother's school, shaping the next generation of players while still finding his own way. He was respected, but he wasn't a global icon yet. That all changed with a single phone call. In 1979, Ozzy Osbourne was a man adrift after his chaotic exit from Black Sabbath. The Prince of Darkness was on the verge of becoming a caricature of his former self. His future wife and manager, Sharon Arden, knew he needed a miracle, a new sound, a new partner, a new fire. He found it in Randy Rhoads. Ozzy later admitted he was so drunk at the audition he almost missed the moment that would save his career. This small, unassuming guitarist plugged into a practice amp and, in Ozzy's words, blew my mind. It wasn't just the speed. It was the melodic intelligence and the sophisticated structure within the chaos. It was the sound of the future. What followed was one of the most explosive partnerships in rock history. Together, they created Blizzard of Oz. The album single-handedly resurrected Ozzy's career and set a new gold standard for heavy metal. The songs were a perfect blend of Ozzy's dark showmanship and Randy's revolutionary guitar work. On Mr. Crowley, his solos were, like Gothic, Baroque masterpieces, meticulously constructed but full of raw emotion. And then there was Crazy Train. With its iconic riff and a solo that's still a rite of passage for guitarists, the song became an anthem. This wasn't just noise, it was composition. Randy had injected the blues-based rock of Black Sabbath with the precision of his classical training, creating something entirely new, neoclassical metal. Their second album, Diary of a Madman, released just a year later in 1981, pushed the boundaries even further. The title track was an epic suite that showcased Randy's growing ambition as a composer. He wasn't content just being a guitar hero. He wanted to earn a degree in classical music and evolve beyond rock and roll. On tour, the band was unstoppable. Ozzy, the wild frontman, was balanced by Randy, the composed virtuoso. Bassist Rudy Sarzo, Randy's old friend from Quiet Riot, joined the band, cementing a lineup that felt like a force of nature. Keyboardist Don Airey, a seasoned pro, rounded out the sound. Airey later recalled that despite Ozzy's reputation, Sharon Osbourne kept things professional on the road. There were hardly any drinks backstage or on the bus. Randy was the musical core, and Ozzy himself admitted that Randy had a patience with him that Tony Iommi never did, giving him hope after Black Sabbath. But by early 1982, Randy was growing weary of the rock and roll lifestyle. Don Airey confirmed that Randy wasn't happy in his final weeks, tired of the grind and frustrated with Ozzy's substance abuse. After a show in Knoxville, Tennessee, Randy reportedly argued with Ozzy, telling him, "You'll kill yourself, you know." One of these days. He was an artist with ambitions far beyond the next arena. He was a composer, a student, a teacher. At only 25 years old, he had already changed the game. No one knew his story was about to be sealed by tragedy. March 19th, 1982. A black day on the calendar for rock fans. After the Knoxville show, the Ozzy Osbourne tour bus was headed to Orlando, Florida. Needing to fix a faulty air conditioner, the driver, Andrew Aycock, stopped in Leesburg, Florida, at the Flying Baron Estates, a property owned by the tour bus company's owner. The compound had a large mansion and, fatefully, a private airstrip with a hangar. Most of the band, including Ozzy and Sharon, were asleep on the bus. But a few people were awake, including Aycock, the 36-year-old bus driver. Aycock had a pilot's license, though it was later revealed to be expired. According to the official story, what happened next was a series of terrible decisions. Without permission, Aycock took a single-engine 1955 Beechcraft F-35 Bonanza from the hangar for a joyride. The first flight included keyboardist Don Airey and the band's tour manager, Jake Duncan. During this flight, Aycock started buzzing the tour bus, flying dangerously low over it, apparently trying to wake up the drummer. It was a foolish stunt, but they landed safely. Then, they went up again. This time, the passengers were Randy Rhoads and the band's 58-year-old seamstress, Rachel Youngblood. Why would Randy, who had a known fear of flying, get on that plane? The most common explanation is that he wanted to take aerial photos for his mother. He reportedly tried to get bassist Rudy Sarzo to come with him, but Sarzo stayed in bed, a decision that would haunt him. Rachel Youngblood was also hesitant to go, reportedly because she had a heart condition. Aycock allegedly promised her he'd keep the flight calm, but that promise was broken. Once in the air, Aycock again aimed for the tour bus. He made 2 low passes. On the third try, something went catastrophically wrong. At around 10 a.m., flying at over 100 miles per hour, the plane came in too low. Its left wing slammed into the top of the tour bus, tearing a gash in its roof. The impact sheared the wing off, sending the plane spiraling out of control. It careened over the bus, hit a large pine tree, and nosedived into the garage of the nearby mansion. The explosion was immediate and massive, and Rudy Sarzo was jolted awake by a loud boom that shook the entire bus. He thought they'd been in a road accident. When he came out, he saw shattered glass and the tour manager screaming, "They're gone! They're gone!" Ozzy, woken by the blast, was met with a scene of utter horror. The crash was instantly fatal for all 3 people on board. The fire was so intense that Randy had to be identified by his dental records and personal jewelry. The official investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, would cement the narrative for decades. The NTSB report blamed the pilot, Andrew Aycock, for poor judgment and his failure to maintain clearance from the bus. In other words, it was a stunt gone wrong. This story was solidified when Aycock's toxicology report found cocaine in his system. By contrast, Randy Rhoads' report was clean, showing only nicotine. For 40 years, the story was set. A brilliant musician, dead because of the reckless cocaine-fueled actions of his bus driver. For decades, the official story of pilot error stood as the grim, undisputed final chapter of Randy Rhoads' life. It was a simple, enraging narrative that provided a clear person to blame: Andrew Aycock. But as time wore on, those who lived through the tragedy began to voice doubts and offer details that didn't quite fit. One alternate theory that emerged was deeply sinister. Aycock's estranged wife had been on the bus trying to reconcile with him, and she reportedly came out just as the plane made its final pass. Both Rudy Sarzo and Don Airey have speculated that Aycock, seeing her, might have made an impulsive, suicidal decision to crash the plane into the bus to kill her. This theory turns the incident from a reckless prank into a potential murder-suicide attempt. But it's testimony from another key member of the Ozzy camp that presents the most compelling and radically different explanation. Bob Daisley, the bassist who co-wrote and played on both Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, has spent years piecing together information. Though he wasn't in the band at the time of the crash, his connection was profound. Daisley champions a theory that shifts the blame from pilot recklessness to a sudden, catastrophic medical emergency in the cockpit. Daisley's theory focuses on the other passenger, 58-year-old Rachel Youngblood. According to what Daisley has gathered, Rachel was reluctant to get on the plane specifically because she had a known heart condition. She allegedly told Aycock about her condition, and he promised to take it easy. This fact alone makes the joyride story seem less likely. Why would a pilot, having just been warned of a passenger's serious medical issue, immediately start doing dangerous stunts? This is where Daisley's theory takes a dramatic turn. He believes that during the flight, Rachel Youngblood suffered a massive, fatal heart attack. Daisley asserts the Beechcraft F-35 Bonanza could be a dual-control aircraft, meaning a passenger in the front could access a yoke and pedals that mirrored the pilot's. If Rachel was in the co-pilot's seat and had a heart attack, her involuntary convulsions could have caused her to stomp on the rudder pedals or push the yoke forward. In a small plane like a Bonanza, especially at low altitude, such an unexpected and forceful move would be catastrophic. The plane would have lurched violently. Aycock, caught completely by surprise, would have been fighting against the physical force of a person in medical distress. In this scenario, he wasn't a reckless stunt pilot. He was a man desperately trying to regain control. The clipping of the bus wasn't the goal. It was the tragic result of a plane that was already out of control. Daisley has passionately argued for this theory, stating, "I don't think that they were buzzing the bus. I don't think Aycock was out of his mind on cocaine. I think Rachel had a heart attack and she sent the plane plummeting." He has claimed the autopsy confirmed this, but it's critical to state this detail is not present in the publicly available NTSB reports or autopsy summaries and remains unsubstantiated. Speculation. Still, this theory introduces the element of pure, unavoidable fate into the tragedy. Bob Daisley's heart attack theory provides a new lens through which to view the scattered accounts of that morning. The most powerful of these is from the only band member to see the crash, keyboardist Don Airey. Airey was standing outside, trying to get photos of the flight for Randy with a telephoto lens. His description of what he saw is chilling. He reported seeing a struggle going on inside the plane and said the plane's wings were rapidly tipping from side to side, a classic sign of a pilot fighting for control. For years, this struggle was interpreted in different ways. Some believe it was Randy, realizing the pilot was flying recklessly, trying to intervene. This paints Randy as a hero, fighting to save his friends on the ground. But viewed through the prism of Daisley's theory, the struggle takes on an even more tragic meaning. What if the struggle wasn't Randy fighting a reckless pilot, but pilot Andrew Aycock fighting to save the plane from an uncontrollable crisis? Imagine the scene. Rachel Youngblood slumps over or convulses, her body locking the controls. A panicked Aycock is trying to overpower her involuntary force on the yoke while trying to fly the plane. The rocking of the wings that Ares saw would not be a pilot hot-dogging, but the desperate final moments of a man who had lost all control. This interpretation reframes Andrew Aycock. He is no longer simply the villain. The cocaine found in his system was irresponsible, but it may have been a contributing factor rather than the sole cause of the crash itself. His decision to take the plane up without permission was still reckless, but the crash might not have been the result of his actions in the air. Instead, he becomes another victim, a pilot faced with a one-in-a-million crisis at the worst possible altitude. This also adds a heartbreaking layer of irony to the story. Randy agreed to go up, despite his fear of flying, partly because Rachel was going, and he believed the pilot would be cautious due to her heart condition. We are left with a collision of narratives. On one hand, the official NTSB report, pilot error, buzzing the bus, and poor judgment compounded by drug use. It's concise and places blame squarely on one individual's recklessness. On the other hand, a theory built from insider accounts that suggests a medical emergency, a loss of control, and a failed struggle for survival. We will likely never know for certain what happened because the only 3 people who knew for sure perished in the fire. But the existence of this theory means the mystery isn't as solved as we once thought. The sound of the explosion was followed by screams. For Ozzy Osbourne and his band, the world had ended at 10 a.m. in a field in Florida. The aftermath was a blur of horror and grief. Rudy Sarzo described the feeling as pure hopelessness, a low, ominous frequency in his head that drowned everything out. Ozzy, who had lost the musical partner that resurrected his career, was inconsolable. Sarzo recalls finding Ozzy in a church, kneeling and sobbing, "Why? Why?" The loss shattered him. Sharon Osbourne, then Ozzy's fiancée and manager, was forced to be the anchor in the storm. She later recounted the gruesome scene, stating, "They were all in bits. It was just body parts everywhere." In the days that followed, an impossible decision was made. The tour would go on. 6 days after the crash, a visibly emotional Ozzy appeared on TV, vowing to continue because Randy would like me to continue. A week later, guitarist Bernie Tormé bravely stepped into an impossible role, filling the shoes of a legend. For the surviving members, the joy was gone. Rudy Sarzo would later leave the band, explaining that after Randy's death, his performances became robotic, just going through the motions. Don Airey, the sole witness, rarely spoke of the crash publicly for years, a quiet man burdened by a horrific memory. For Ozzy, the trajectory of his career was forever altered. The wild years that followed were seen by some as a man trying to numb unbearable pain. Every show became a tribute. In 1987, he released the album Tribute, a collection of live recordings from the 1981 tour that showcased Randy's incandescent talent. Decades later, Ozzy's reverence for Randy remains palpable. He consistently posts tributes, calling Randy the best musician he ever met. Randy Rhoads' legacy is immense. With only 2 major studio albums with Ozzy, he casts a shadow as long as legends who recorded for decades. He is the ultimate what-if. Nearly every metal guitarist who came of age in the 80s owes a debt to his fusion of classical sensibilities with hard rock aggression. He made being a student of music cool. The mystery of his death, now viewed with new and heartbreaking context, only deepens that legacy. For 40 years, we mourned a genius lost to a senseless act of rock and roll excess. But if the alternative theory holds any weight, the tragedy is even more profound. It might not have been about recklessness alone. It could have been about fate, a random, cruel twist of biology that occurred thousands of feet in the air. It might mean that an irresponsible decision was met with an unavoidable catastrophe. The story of Randy Rhoads is a reminder of how fragile genius is and how quickly the brightest lights can be extinguished. What are your thoughts on this alternative theory? Does it change how you view this iconic tragedy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more of rock's greatest mysteries, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories behind the music. The death of Randy Rhoads will forever be one of rock music's greatest tragedies. While the official record points to pilot error, the persistent questions and the compelling theory of a medical emergency remind us that history is rarely simple. Whether a victim of pure recklessness or a victim of a tragic accident compounded by it, the world lost a true virtuoso on March 19, 1982. His career was a brief, brilliant flash, but the thunder of his music and his influence will echo for generations to come. Long live Randy Rhoads,